Leon Draisaitl hits 1,000 career points. Connor McDavid is getting going. And don't look now, but the Oilers are starting to turn a corner.
You are Locked On Oilers, your daily podcast on the Edmonton Oilers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Thursday edition of Locked On Oilers. I am your host, Nick Zararis. This is my 10th season doing digital hockey content, my third as a host here on the Locked On Podcast Network. I want to thank everyone that is making Locked On Oilers their first listen of the day. Locked On Oilers is a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. And today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel, where you can bet on live NFL games all season long. Head on over to FanDuel.com to get started. So on today's show, we're going to break down some of the big storylines coming out of the game against Pittsburgh on Tuesday night. And we'll start Draisaitl hitting 1,000 points, and we'll celebrate him as a player, as an international player, which I don't think we give him enough credit for based on the journey, the path, all that good stuff. Our second segment, we're going to pivot to talking about some of the nasty numbers McDavid's put up in December and why he's been a driving force, which will naturally segue us to our third and final segment, where we will break down why the Oilers' underlying numbers are trending in the right direction and some of the strategy choices Kris Knoblauch's made to coax better performance. So to start out, I love a good athlete glaze session. I'm just going to be honest with you. It is so much fun to talk about these types of players, the Leon Draisaitls, the Connor McDavids of the world. Because every single time you put one of their games on, or even if you're just catching the highlights, you have a chance to see something you have never seen before. And Draisaitl is an interesting case because he is a Robin to one of the great players of all time, when he's already in of himself a great player of all time, and not just of his era. I do want people to understand how special Draisaitl is, and we'll get to some of the numbers in a minute. But we're not that far removed from the snarky side of the hockey internet, calling Draisaitl a McDavid merchant, saying he's not that good, saying he's too dependent on the power play. And for a long time, that kind of made sense on a rudimentary level. But where I've come around and watching it happen and be applied in real time around the league with superstars is kind of the use case. It's the proof. It's the evidence. And the reason you overlap Cale Makar and Nathan MacKinnon, or at their best, Panarin and Adam Fox, Pasternak, Charlie McAvoy, Heiskanen and Mikko Rantanen, Forsling and Barkov, whatever dynamic duo you're thinking of. And I know Draisaitl and McDavid are two forwards, fine, but you get what I mean. When we talk about amplifying traits and what brings the best out of guys, it only makes sense in certain situations to load up, to put your two best players together, because you know that if they play together, they have the capacity to do something really special that they couldn't otherwise do on their own. And yes, because this is sports, we will always have narratives. We will always have debates, and that's fine. Debates are good. Honest, intellectually balanced debate is actually a really useful skill, and it's something we lack a lot of in sports because we all fry our brains with our phones a few inches away from our face every day for hours at a time. But when I hear people talk about Draisaitl now, there's a lot more of a reverence for what he is. And like I had said before, it changed about the time he won that Hart Trophy. McDavid suffered an injury. He missed, I want to say it was close to 2 to 3 weeks. And in that window of games in 2019-20 prior to the COVID shutdown, Draisaitl went nuclear. And sure, it was a little bit funky in terms of the underlying numbers. They outperformed their metrics. But when you're in that type of situation where you're the guy because the team's best player is out, it's okay that he went crazy. Like, that's the ideal outcome. And sure, maybe not the most efficient, not sustainable, but the fact he had that in his bag really opened up some eyes. And ever since really 2020, I think Draisaitl's really cemented himself as, at the worst, the third or fourth best player in the NHL over the course of his time in Edmonton. I would say 2018 is where Draisaitl really starts to explode numbers-wise. And for context, Draisaitl has 866 points in the regular season since 2018. That is third most in the NHL behind McDavid and Nathan MacKinnon. He has 366 goals in that time since 2018. That's the second most behind Austin Matthews. He has 500 assists. He's sixth. I'm not going to list off the 5 guys ahead of him, but McDavid, Kucherov, Panarin, some really, really good players. And then the other point that really solidified where Draisaitl is how last season went. And the fact that Draisaitl was so dominant last year, especially at 5-on-5, with his most common 2 line mates is Victor Arvidsson, who's no longer with the team, and Vasily Podkolzin, who was arguably on his way out of the NHL going into last season. He was a savvy addition, and Podkolzin has had a really nice trajectory over the last 2 years. Going into the game on Tuesday, he was on pace for 21 goals. I think because he scored, it will be higher than that now, but you drag a line as the dominant play driver, as the guy who carries the puck into the zone, who sets up, and as Sportsnet loves to remind us anytime Leon makes a crazy play, he's a better passer than he is a shooter, and he's the second best shooter in the NHL over the last 7 years. That's a pretty high and remarkable bar, and Draisaitl's too old. He's not going to get an honest chance to give Ovi a run for his money, but in this window, Draisaitl has really solidified himself as not only a great regular season player, but an incredible postseason player. So in the postseason since 2020, the Oilers made the playoffs once prior to that. Draisaitl's got 125 points. That's second behind McDavid. He's got 46 goals. That's the most. Nathan McKinnon's a couple behind him. And then he's got the third most assists in that period of time as well. I run out of words to describe what a joy Draisaitl is as a player. And I know it hasn't always been easy. I know the cultural differences for what our expectations of our athletes are in North America are different from what they are in Europe. I know there are members of Oilers media who have at various points given it to Draisaitl, and Draisaitl's been more than happy to give it right back because he's a great player and he's entitled to stick up for himself to some degree. And at this point, I can make an honest argument that Draisaitl is a top 5 European-born player ever. And yes, we can be a little fugazi if we're counting the Russians. And I know how you feel about Russia as part of Europe is a cultural question, a socio-political question. But if we're not including the Russians, that takes Ovi out. And if we're talking about the Swedes, if we're talking about the Finns, he's in the conversation with anybody you could pull from those countries. And look, I'm a big Teemu Selanne guy. I was at the Ranger game on Monday and I saw a lot of Selanne Duck jerseys, which put a smile on my face and made me feel not as old, even though everybody who had one of those jerseys was my age or older. But nevertheless, this is one of the great players in our game. And he has solidified himself as a future Hall of Fame player, one of the 5 best European players ever. He's going to have a chance to retire top 5 Oiler of all time. Once you get past Gretzky and Messier and Yari Curry and McDavid, I can even make an argument Draisaitl's probably better than Yari Curry. But we don't have to go there yet. That's a conversation for the middle of July when we don't have as much to talk about and we can do an honest conversation about where Draisaitl is, where he's going to end up if he keeps up a close piece of what he's on right now in terms of the Oilers' all-time numbers. But this is a special hockey player who I really wanted to win the Hart Trophy last year, and I felt his case was really strong. And look, I know Hellebuck was the best player on the President's Trophy winning team, and that's a strong argument. To win the Hart, you need to have a narrative. And yes, Leon's defense was borderline elite last year. He put up incredible even strength numbers with 2 guys who were probably more bottom sixers than top sixers, and he never really complains. He's had some really incredible moments in the postseason over the last couple of years. He tied the record for overtime game-winning goals in a single playoff run this past year. And every now and then, when I'm struggling to fall asleep at night and I'm looking up at the ceiling, I think about how loud I yelled when Draisaitl scored that overtime goal in Game 1 against Florida this past June. And I really thought the Oilers were going to do it, even without Hyman, with the injuries on the back end, with Ekholm struggling. I really thought Leon and Connor were just going to supernova their way through. And that's why we play the games. The journey is part of the process. And we're going to take our first break on today's edition of Locked On Oilers. And when we come back, speaking of Connor McDavid supernovaing, we're going to dive into the numbers since the start of December. And then we'll correlate that directly into our third segment, talking about the Oilers at large, right after this. On this edition of Locked On Oilers, we've got your team covered every day. NFL Sundays move fast. One big play, and suddenly everything's different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds. Every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. Live betting is best when the game starts to shift, a receiver gets hot, defenses tighten up, or a momentum swinging turnover. FanDuel gets you in the action with live spreads and money lines that adjust instantly, player props that update as players heat up. You can bet on next touchdown score, drive results, game totals, and so much more. It keeps you locked into every possibility. Enormous game in the NFC West with the capacity to determine who's the 1 seed in the NFC. Sean McVay and the Rams heading up to Quest Field to see the Seahawks in a game that, frankly, I'm going to be upset with myself if I fall asleep during. So I'm going to do my best to stay up, watch that. And if you want to be right in the middle of the action, you can visit FanDuel.com and place your live NFL bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you. Thank you so much to everybody that is making Locked On Oilers their first listen of the day, and everyone who has helped make Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. You already live your team every day. Now take it up a level and go ad-free. Join the Everydayer Club and get Locked On Oilers with no interruptions, access to a members-only Discord for other everydayers, and so much more, all for just $5 a month or $50 for the year. Check the link in the show notes for more. And real quick, because funky scheduling, I didn't do an episode Tuesday into Wednesday, so this is technically the post game from Pittsburgh, and I wish I could give everybody on the team flowers we got something good out of this game, because that was a type of convincing performance that gets you to buy back in. You know, it's Pacino and Godfather 3. Just when you think you're out, the Oilers have pulled me back in over the last 2 weeks, and the underlying numbers we'll discuss. The McDavid production we're about to hit right now, but that was as dominating a victory as we can. We know Connor gets riled up. He gets fired up to play Sidney Crosby. That's his idol. That's his hero. That's a living legend. And I love a guy who rises to the occasion and really understands the weight. And I find McDavid to be the most interesting player in the league because of the pressure and the burden he puts on himself. And I hate to sound like a Facebook grind set influencer, but pressure's a privilege. If people expect stuff from you, that means you have the capacity to do special things. And Connor has always carried that burden. I tell the anecdote all the time on the show. I know my everydayers are sick of it at this point. When Connor was in kindergarten, he asked his parents to help him write a letter to Sidney Crosby. Mind you, Sidney Crosby was 15 years old in the Quebec Major Junior League as a teenager. And Connor wanted his parents to help him ask Sidney Crosby how Sid handles the pressure, how he handles the expectations. And Connor was in kindergarten, 5 years old. And this kid said, I want to be that good. And it is a real heartwarming feeling knowing that these guys are finally going to get to play together in the Olympics. Look, I'll be candid with you. I will be pulling for the United States, but if I'm really going to get mad at Connor, Sid, and Nate Mack winning a gold medal together, probably the only time they'll ever get to do it. Look, if you told me Sid was still playing in 2030 and he wanted to go for another gold, I know Team Canada would take him. I know the guys on the team would be ecstatic to have him. But I think at this point, you're year to year if you're Sid. And speaking of McDavid, the numbers are insane when you go month by month. So October, 1.17 points per game. November, 2.69. So more than doubled in 1 month. And then December, 3.67 points per game. We're talking about tripling your point production on a per game basis in the span of 2 months. And you add on top of that, 44% of the expected goal share in October. Disgusting. Something I really cited as one of my causes for concern. Why this team didn't feel like the way the last two did, where, yeah, they were losing a lot early in the season, but the underlying numbers were always there. They were always in favor of a positive regression. And through November, they were still only at 48% of expected goal share in the month of November. And then December, they've dialed it up. They're up to 64% of the expected goal share. And getting Zach Hyman back and Zach Hyman into a rhythm is such a valuable cog in this machine. And it's a real shame Jack Roslovic's hurt right now. I really cannot begin to stress how scary of an injury that is, to have a puck hit you there, The recovery process, I can't imagine. I know there's a famous story about Carlton Fisk back in the 70s, the Red Sox catcher who took a foul ball in a similar area, and the pain was so intense he fainted. And Roslovic is at some point going to return to hockey, but that's about as gnarly and scary an injury as you're going to suffer because it's kind of an accident. And you're not expecting to get hit there. You wear protection, but it's brutal to lose a guy who's playing so well, because you think about what the Oilers could look like, where you could have him, Roslovic, on Draisaitl's right with Podkolzin. You're running Nuge, McDavid, Hyman. You're pushing guys further down the lineup, and you're going to unlock more, because right now, and we'll talk about it more in our final segment, the only line the Oilers have that's a massive red flag is that third line. And it's frankly because Adam Henrique, Trent Frederick, and the candidates in that mix just aren't fast enough. They are consistently hemmed in their own end. They can't really sustain forechecking pressure all that well. They win board battles when they're in the right place at the right time, but that's far and few between because they just aren't that fast. And it's going to require some calibration. They did call up Hudson. They have Clattenburg whenever he comes back from injury. So I think they're going to continue to play around with that bottom six, but we keep talking about this. McDavid and Hyman, 96 minutes together in December, 9-5 outscoring opponents, 63% of the expected goal share. And then the big thing, and I want to give credit where it's due, it was in The Athletic today, so I didn't have to go and do the research myself, which I was grateful for. McDavid's playing a little bit less, both at even strength and significantly less on the penalty kill, and he's getting better results. And there's always a tipping point where you have too much cowbell and the sauce goes away and you get diminishing returns because you're pushing your one guy too hard. And McDavid's down a minute change from, he was playing 17-18 going into December. This month, he's at 16-21 at even strength. So just a shade under, a minute less. And then the big thing, he went from killing a minute 28 of penalties per game to basically a floater shift where he's getting out there maybe 7 to 10 seconds on average in December. And you have to understand that is the finest lines to walk. And we know Connor and Leon are the best of the best in the world. I have no qualms about saying those guys are 2 of the 3 or 4 best players in the world. And getting the maximum results out of them requires some finesse. You need to know exactly the cutoff line where the return starts to diminish. And over the course of the last month, McDavid's got 12.16 even strength shooting percentage. That's up. That's up. And then he's also got an 8.95 even strength save percentage in his minutes. So the luck stats are starting to come around in support, in conjunction really with the better underlying numbers. And we'll talk about the team as a whole. And yes, obviously, Connor playing better in December is a driving force for the Oilers' turnaround, their improvement in the month of December, the 8 games they've played so far. And then you think about where they were down at 880 through October and November for even strength saves. So we're talking 880 versus 895. That's a significant jump. And then 12.16 to 10.42. It's not a huge amount difference-wise in terms of shooting percentage, but it's not nothing. And you start getting some bounces to go your way. You start building some confidence. Then you can make some special things happen. And that's what I spend so much time in my everydayers. November felt like the Oilers constantly 1 step forward, 1 step back, 1 step forward, 1 step back. And they weren't making any progress. It was hard to build confidence. Guys didn't look right. And now you have a real opportunity with the way the league at large is playing right now, where the Oilers are in 3rd in the Pacific Division as we sit here at the time of this recording. And they can make something happen here. And I am increasingly becoming less skeptical of the Ducks, unfortunately. I know they don't play great defense, but they have a lot of guys. I was really impressed with Cutter Gauthier on Monday. I thought he was a really noticeable player. I really liked what I saw from Bennett Sanecki. They have a lot of interesting pieces, and with each passing day, I'm becoming more and more convinced the Ducks really might be a playoff team. But we are going to take our second and final break on today's edition of Locked On Oilers. When we come back, we'll dive into the team-wide numbers, why positive regression is smiling upon the Oilers, and a whole lot more on today's edition of Locked On Oilers. We've got your team covered every day. The holidays are amazing, but they can get so overwhelming. Travel, gifts, parties, year-end expenses. It's really easy to lose track of your money this time of year. And that's exactly why Monarch is a game changer. If you want to keep your finances under control this holiday season, you need to be using Monarch, rated Wall Street Journal's best budgeting app of 2025. Monarch is the all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire life together in one clean, simple, easy-to-use dashboard. A holiday spending category is a lifesaver. You can see exactly what's in your gift and travel budget in real time. In minutes, you can check your net worth, link all your accounts, and keep track of your contributions before deadlines. Monarch makes money check-in simple. A minute or two every week, and you're good. Don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarch.com in your browser for half off your first year subscription. That's 50% off your first year at monarch.com with code LOCKEDONNHL. Thank you so much to everyone that is hanging out on this Thursday edition of Locked On Oilers as we are making our way through December, and talked about it on Monday, talked about it on Tuesday too, frankly. This team is going to get into a groove if they are going to be the team we think they are. If the Oilers are going to make serious noise as a Stanley Cup contender, that work is already being built. The foreman is out there. They're laying the cement of the foundation. And now it's incumbent upon the guys putting the house together to follow the blueprint, keep it in line, not go over cost, not take too long. Because over the last 8 games, the Oilers' underlying numbers range from sick to meh. And 5-2-1, 11 points in your 8 games so far in December. That's pretty good. You get 5-2-1s over and over again, you're going to end up in one of these division spots. You play 580, 600 points percentage hockey, you're going to end up being a pretty good team at the end of the year. And I know spent a lot of November talking about the math. The Oilers probably needing to be a 610 to 620 points percentage team in the second half of the season if they were to continue playing the way they were to make up where historically teams have finished. And that is an important caveat here. I do think it is worth mentioning that we base our projections based on history. The last wildcard spot has generally been in the mid-90s. The Oilers are on pace for about 85 to 88, depending on the day. And maybe this is a year where you get a 92-point team, and that does happen from time to time. You had the Capitals a couple years ago sneaking in on the last day. And every now and then you do get a funky year. And so far, I would say this qualifies. A lot of these teams taking turns beating each other, and the Oilers, even though October and November were not great, have played pretty well as of late. And 17th in scoring chances, per scoring chance share, whatever. 5th in shot share. That's noticeable. Having the puck that much in the offensive zone where you are getting actual tangible shots on goal, while also, even though you're getting outscoring chance because you're in that bottom half of the upper 16, you're not letting those scoring chances become shots on goal. And it's harder to play that way. It does ask a lot of your defenders and your forwards playing defense to get in lanes, to affect shots, to block shots. And that's a big disparity. That's something worth keeping an eye on as the season goes along. Expected goals, they're 10th. Nothing crazy, but when you consider how bad the third line has been by an expected goals measure, the fact they're 10th over the last few weeks is remarkable. And then high danger chances, they have the 4th highest share of them over the last 8 games. That's another indicator that, okay, we are starting to see signs of life. It's not just they're winning games. It's they are winning games. The underlying numbers are supporting that what they're doing is sustainable. And that's your key right there. You play in a way you can repeat over and over and over again, and you establish a certain baseline and floor for your expectations. And then you get a little hungry. Then you start to push because it's not enough to win 5 out of 8. It's we got to win 8 out of 8. It's we got to win 8 out of 10. And I'm not saying the Oilers are going to go on any type of historic heater. I think anyone who forecasts or guesses on that is just trying to have a little fun. And look, I get it. Sometimes you don't have a fully fleshed out idea, but the Oilers are capable of playing some pretty good hockey as of late. And now the question becomes, what is working for them and can they keep doing it? Because it's one thing to go on a crazy shooting bender. Everybody knows the Canucks a couple years ago when they went to the second round and lost to the Oilers ultimately. Their PDO was like 103 the entire season. They were getting insane shooting. You got like a 40-goal season out of Brock Besser. You got a 100-point season out of Pettersson and JT Miller. Like, that team was so overheated and so over leveraged to play the way they were, and they were winning. And of course, the conundrum becomes, how do you tell guys who are winning games, hey, what you're doing isn't sustainable. We need to play like this. It's one of the great challenges, and it's frankly one of the great questions I have, and something that I think really varies from coach to coach, because you want to coach your guys into maintaining a certain expectation and a certain standard. If you continue to be top 10 in expected goals and high danger chances in shot share and goal share, you're going to win a lot of hockey games. And this 21st team save percentage at 5-on-5 in December is not great, but it's passable. It's not the worst in the league. And we'll see whether or not the Oilers go out and add another goalie, if it's Connor Ingram. I know I'm kind of at my wit's end as far as Calvin Pickard goes. I don't really need to see him play anymore for the Oilers in a competitive season. And then the power play, humming on all cylinders. The penalty kills killed 20 of the last 25 penalties it's gone on. The Oilers are playing really good hockey right now from an underlying metric standpoint, and that leads you to believe that they're going to have the capacity to play like this for some period of time. And seasons, very much like games, are a series of runs. The Oilers are playing really well right now. Their underlying numbers are glowing off the page of my notes over there that I keep glancing over if you're watching over on YouTube. Can you sustain that for a month? Because if you can play like that for a month, and you go 5-2-1, 5-2-1 in the course of your 16 games in December, you're going to have a good season. And right now, and I said this a lot while the Oilers were meandering through November, you get points now and you bank some space. We saw the Oilers do it in real time last year, where they went into the Four Nations break playing pretty well. They had solid underlying numbers. They had one of the better records in the league. From the end of November through the Four Nations break, the Oilers had one of the 5 best records in the NHL, and they really got rolling. And that afforded them April and March, where a lot of guys were injured, a lot of guys weren't playing or playing at a reduced capacity. And the Oilers had the luxury of sitting guys who needed to get better, of sitting guys who needed to heal, who needed to get healthy. And if you're in a rock fight for one of those last spots, good luck telling the world-class athlete he's not going to play because he's going to make his wrist sprain or his knee sprain worse. That's just, unfortunately, even though it's the logical thing to do, it's not the way sports work. We are not rational individuals, fan or player. Fan is short for fanatic for a reason. And this team, as much as I complained in October and November, has started to show signs of life. This is a team that I think is probably a level below your Colorados, your Dallas, maybe your Minnesota. We'll see how Quinn Hughes takes to playing there. And beyond that, I could see a world where they're the 4th or 5th best team in the West, and you're in that 2-3 playoff game. And whether it's the Kings, whether it's Vegas, whoever it is, the Oilers will have a puncher's chance against that team. And then from there, you'll see, because the team is constantly evolving and trying to improve on a day-by-day basis. That will do it for today's edition of Locked On Oilers. Thank you so much to everybody that made Locked On Oilers their first listen of the day. Thank you to everyone who's helped make Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. Be sure to subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts or over on YouTube for your first listen. Thank you so much. Go check out Locked On NHL Game Night for your second listen. I will talk to you guys tomorrow. Until then, let's go Oilers.